Howdy folks, it's me, Josh. So for today's video, I held a contest in my Discord server to see who could create the most interesting alternate history scenario, with the best scenario being made into a video. There were plenty of great scenarios submitted, but in the end, I decided to go with a scenario written by the user Brandonius on if France had developed their colonies in North America. So, without further ado, let's get into it. After the discovery of the New World in 1492, and more importantly, after the Spanish made bank there, pretty much every major European nation jumped on the bandwagon to settle the continent. And France was no different. In 1523, France sent its first expedition to the New World, landing in a land that they dubbed Nouvelle-Angoulême, or as you'd probably know it, New York. But it wouldn't be for another 11 years until, in 1534, France would create its first settlement in North America in what's now Quebec. But once they began settling in North America, France was prompted with a choice of what they wanted out of their colony. On the one hand, a truly self-sustaining society built up into a new France. But, on the other hand, beavers. You can probably tell which one they went with. Unlike the other nations that had colonized North America, particularly Britain, France wasn't really all that concerned with sending a bunch of settlers over to build the area into a new France, but instead, they only really cared about beavers, or more specifically, the money that they could get from selling their fur. So, fueled by this beaver frenzy, the French would end up colonizing a vast amount of territory in what's today Canada and the American Midwest. But since the colony was primarily focused on resources, and because I don't assume many women do or ever have aspired to be a beaver trapper, the vast majority of the people who went to New France were men. And since there were a bunch of dudes and practically no women, people weren't having a lot of kids, so the population couldn't really grow all that much, and the colony couldn't sustain itself. And as a result of having a crap ton of land, but practically no people, New France ended up being extremely underdeveloped and sparsely populated, to the point that, upon the outbreak of the French and Indian War in 1754, the 13 colonies had about 1.5 million settlers, whereas New France had only about 70,000. Eventually, France did begin sending people to the colony for settlement, and the population did begin to grow, but by this point, it was too late, as after France's defeat in the war, New France would end up being split between Britain and Spain, as France was kicked out of North America. But despite this, the small amount of French settlement that did take place still left a lasting effect on the few places they settled, most notably in Quebec and Louisiana, as the influence of those French settlers is still seen to this day. But aside from this, and that one time that they tried to invade Mexico, France's influence on the continent completely disappeared, as they never again realized the possibility of a true new France. But what if that changed? What if, in an alternate timeline, France had made an effort to settle New France with the goal of building up a new homeland for the French people? When it comes to how this could be done, it's really simple actually. France was an absolute monarchy, so all we'd really have to do is have some king, likely in the 1600s, begin a push for mass settlement in New France. With New France seeing a great amount of settlement coming in from, real France, the population explodes as the people begin expanding outwards, settling the region, moving down towards the Great Lakes. And with this increased French presence in the area, as the territory isn't practically uninhabited anymore, Anglo-American expansion into these territories is a lot harder. By the time of the French and Indian War, the French still lose, but due to the significantly higher French population, France manages to keep most of its territory in Quebec and the Great Lakes, as Britain takes the mostly uninhabited lands around the Mississippi, except for New Orleans, not wanting the trouble of trying to govern the huge French population in the rest of the colony. And in America, despite still having immense grievances against the British government, the Americans, worried that France might invade if they rebelled, decide not to revolt, instead resorting to peaceful matters to resolve their grievances. Back in France, the government still faces immense debts as the populace continues to grow dissatisfied. But with France still retaining its colonies in North America, and without the American Revolution to give inspiration for the revolt, the French Revolution never happens either, as liberal Frenchmen instead just move out to New France in hopes of creating their enlightened republic out there. These aren't the only groups in France that seek refuge in the New World, though, as other persecuted groups, such as the Huguenots and other French Protestants, begin migrating to New France en masse in an effort to escape persecution from the absolutist regime in France. As Britain and France manage to hold on to their colonies in the New World, they, alongside with their mother countries, continue to war with each other over territory in the Ohio River Valley and the Mississippi Delta. And with the territory completely isolated from the rest of New France, it's very likely that the 13 colonies managed to take New Orleans, securing the mouth of the Mississippi River for themselves. New France, meanwhile, begins spreading across modern-day Canada and the northern Great Plains, seizing the British colony of Rupert's Land, while the Anglo-Americans push past the Mississippi River into the southwest, bringing them into conflict with Spain. But once again, due to the sparsely populated nature of the Spanish-held territories, it's very likely that Britain is able to defeat the Spanish and secure its hold over the land, stretching all the way across to California. And speaking of the West Coast, without Britain owning Canada, the territory of Cascadia likely ends up coming under Russian control as they expand the land held by Russian Alaska. And meanwhile, with what would have become the United States still under British control, this means that slavery is likely outlawed much sooner than in our timeline, preventing a civil war. And without the French Revolution, this also prevents the rise of Napoleon, which keeps liberalism and nationalism from spreading across Europe, as the centuries-old order in Europe remains, with the Holy Roman Empire and Papal States surviving. But as disputes between Britain and France once again boil up, along with tensions among other European states, Europe begins to find itself on the verge of what seems to be a repeat of the 7 Years' War. But as this conflict looms ever closer, Europe, and America, maintains its traditional system of absolutism and colonialism. I want to give another big thanks to Brandonius for writing this scenario and to everyone who submitted scenarios for this contest. And if you want to participate in the next one, make sure to join my Discord server through the link in the description for the chance to have your scenarios appear on my channel. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to stick around for more. And hey, you could also, maybe, subscribe or something. So that's it for today's video. Well, till next time, see ya.